week, I found an old video from 2010 with me and a group of friends. And it was like one of these little like flip video things. And I found a video on there and I played it. And it's a video of me, one of my best friends, and another childhood friend. And I was talking at the time about starting like a YouTube video and like how I want to make videos. And he's like, then do it. And it really brought me to tears, because watching in that moment what my friend was trying to tell me that I just wasn't getting and clicking, that I was like, man, if I had started this journey back then. But I wasn't in the right state of mind. I like
that
all
negative,
the
that negative thought process.
It really, really was. But it was like it wasn't registering to him what he was telling me. He was like, you need to just do it.
Hey guys, welcome to Inspired by the Inspired Podcast, Episode 3, where we showcase the stories and experiences of entrepreneurs, artists, and creatives who have found success and inspiration in their personal and professional lives. Today we're joined by Priscilla Natyve, a female entrepreneur and creative director. Priscilla has made a name for herself in the media industry and has a unique perspective of balancing work and family life. As we dig deep into her story, we're going to learn about her background. We're going to learn about how she got started in the industry and what inspires her. So sit back, relax, and get ready to be inspired. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you for taking your time out every day to listen to episode 3 with Priscilla Natyve. I'm glad to have you aboard. She's a really good friend of mine. Known here, new here through Denver, Colorado, and I just want to kind of bring her on because she does have a really good presence with entrepreneurship, creative mindset, something that we all kind of want to pick apart someone's brain. I think she's an excellent source to do. Please introduce yourself and welcome.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. That
You're
was
very
quite
welcome.
the introduction. So my name is Priscilla. I'm a creative media professional, a multi-hyphenate professional, because I happen to do a lot of different things. And I believe that there's a superpower in that. You know, everyone's always being told niche down, whichever one you prefer. But, you know, with my journey in trying to do that, I really learned that I wasn't being true to myself. Mm-hmm. And so with that, I think there was a lot of imposter syndrome, right? Things that happen. And I think leaning more into your strengths is really where you'll kind of overcome that. And then with that, I was like, you know what? It's okay that I like to do music and I like to do photos and videos. And there is a way that I can make that all work for me. Versus having to pick one.
Yeah. Well, and we talked about this before. It's like if you're trying to master something and be a one-dimensional type of creative, then yeah, it does take, you kind of have to, you'll see a landscape photographer. You'll see, people just find their niches and they become really good at it. But there are certain people like myself, and I think all three of us, well, we want to just do everything, try everything. And then later on in life, if we want to, we niche down.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think that's needed because then if you do one thing your whole life, then you'll never know if you like anything else.
Mm-hmm. I know that's always tricky too, because like with music, and I'm sure you know too, like there is the like endless amount of subgenres and all that. But it's like when you actually start creating your music yourself, you're like, I don't know where I fully lay in this whole spectrum. Because I could be way over here, but also classified as over here.
Well, that's what movie stars. They don't want to be like only comedy, comedy. John C. Reilly was, he started off in drama and then went to comedy. Yeah. Jim Carrey, comedy, drama. So you try different things to see if you like it. You don't have to be known for one particular thing.
For sure.
If that's not your forte, if that's not exactly what you want to do.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But I'm curious to get to know you. I know you guys have some history. I have no idea kind of what you have background-wise, what you've done, things like that.
Yeah, tell us about kind of just your background as an entrepreneur, but I mean, just as much as you want to share with the fellow listeners.
It's like where to start, right? Because I feel like this journey started for me back in high school without even knowing it. Okay. With just how my life was laid out for me. So I'm half Nigerian. My mother's Nigerian and my father works in Nigeria. So that was a very interesting dynamic because I didn't know a lot of people who had that background like myself. And with that, I didn't get to see my father a lot. So when I was 11, he permanently moved to Nigeria, and he came home once a year. So that was, as some people can imagine, kind of tough, but he's like my rock and my best friend, and we talked every day, and he did everything he could to be a part of our lives. So it's not that he was like gone,
Like,
you know what I mean? Just physically.
Left,
yeah. But with that, I was having a hard time in high school, and I really wanted to go be with my dad. So they have a great education system out there at the time, because there's a lot happening in Nigeria right now. But I went out there for 2 years, and I had just the best experience of my life, because when you grow up in America, I feel like you're pretty sheltered, right? So
That's
you just
fair, yeah.
Yeah, you just don't know. And so having to go live in a third world country and then live that life and like see the life that my dad was living so that we could enjoy this really good life, it just changed my whole perspective and everything. So anyways, with that, I came back to the States, and you know, with my transcripts, specifically in the county that I was living in.
What year did you come back?
This was 2007.
Okay.
So the year I was supposed to graduate. They told me I could get my GED or graduate at 20 years old. When you're 18, obviously, you're not trying to stay back in school any longer than you have to.
Let's do it again. Keep going.
And I, you know, really wanted that whole 4-year college experience with my friends, and you know, with after getting my GED, I was told that I had to go to community college and then I can get into a 4-year. So I was like, okay, let's do it. Went to school. Everything that I was learning, I'd already learned overseas.
What'd you major?
So at the time, this is hilarious. A lot of people are gonna laugh. I was trying to major in criminal justice.
Okay.
And that's strictly because it was in my family. So it felt like I never knew my grandfather on my dad's side, and the only way I felt like I could have any type of like close relation to him was to go into that, because he was a general in the Air Force and he went to Harvard, studied homicide, just like all of that. So it was like the only thing that I felt like I could connect to this great person that everyone in my life talks about.
Right.
Went to school, and the school that I had gone to, the community college I had gone to, was actually they messed up on a lot of kids' transcripts who were supposed to transfer, and they ended up having to do school another 2 years. And I was just like, I'm not going through this. Like, this is absolutely ridiculous. So I dropped out. It was a really tough decision. My grandmother had died at the time. There was just so many things happening. And I went to my parents and I said, you know, I really just want to take a year off and figure out what it is that I want to do. In that year, I partied, had fun, just lived life, worked assistant manager jobs, bartender jobs, but it wasn't fulfilling. My friends were moving on, going to college, and it was just, I felt like what am I supposed to do? You know, it just felt really, really lost. And then I found massage, and it's funny because it was going to be a flight attendant and travel the world, or like dive into something that could actually potentially change your life. And I'm so glad that I chose massage, because it just opened up this whole world of wellness for me and holistic health. And I was genuinely very happy in that time of my life. It was a really, really great time. I met my husband at that time. We were friends. But it was just like I was weeding out people that didn't need to be in my life. And so, yeah, there was a lot of interesting thing happening there.
Is your husband Nigerian too?
No, my husband is... So my husband's, we don't fully know. He's native for the most part.
Yeah, because I remember
adopted.
that you wanted to work on a documentary about his...
I did, yeah. And I still do.
Yeah.
It's his story to tell, which is where I feel like I don't want to... I don't know, we're still talking about it. He definitely wants the story told, but it's one of those things where he's very introverted, doesn't want all eyes on him. And so trying to tell this story in a way that just gets people to... just shine the awareness on it, I think would be great.
Is it a story about figuring out like more of his past?
Well, no. So it's just, I feel that we're all very privileged to having family, friends. This is a human being that truly has nobody. And me being as privileged as I am with the family that I have and everything, I never knew what that life was like for somebody. So to witness him go about life on his own, he also has a child from another, not a marriage, but another relationship, and she's about 13. So there's just so many things that I saw this person doing on their own, and it, like, I'm gonna like share it because it broke my heart to see someone struggling and not have any support anywhere.
And that's the worst thing, is him being an introvert, like trying to think of ways to tell that story, and it has to be from his perspective.
It does.
It has
It
to
really
be
does.
from his words and his mouth. So I mean, Where is he from?
So he was born in Elkhorn, Wisconsin,
Okay.
and he was found on a Native American reservation. He met his father.
Yeah.
He doesn't know if it really was his father because according to his real mother, his father died. So there's just like a big mess with this whole story and not really knowing where he comes from.
It's a teaser trailer for the documentary, guys.
So he's not Nigerian, but he's one of the most unique, smartest people I've truly ever met. Just because to be on your own, I think really.
I could see him having some strong internal strength.
Oh my gosh! Like he has mastered his mind.
Yeah.
And I envy that because I'm such an emotional person that I'm like, how do you have this control over your emotions?
I think that's what makes the
way
best
you do?
relationships is you do have a negative and a positive,
Yeah.
or at least from different perspectives. Because if you're the same type of person, it's very hard to. If you're both emotional, if
It's
you're
harder
both
to grow.
logic
I see that,
thinking,
yeah.
if you're both logical thinking, you might have different ways of looking at it. So it is nice to have someone that keeps someone grounded. You
We
both keep each other
yeah,
grounded.
absolutely.
Right? Exactly.
So like there's times like he's like, you're way too optimistic, and I'm like, I get that, I hear you, but let's try it.
Yeah. It's not going away.
yeah. So I mean that's again another great moment in my life with meeting him and everything. We unfortunately had a miscarriage, which is why I stopped massage, and there was just like so many things happening in my life.
What time was this roughly?
This was 2013 going into 2014.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was 2014, like literally the beginning. And I was getting in trouble with the law, just like all these different things. It was over weed. It wasn't like I was like a bad person.
At that time period.
But at that time
everybody
period,
is looked at as a bad
yes,
person.
exactly.
It's so crazy, like living in Denver, but like, I mean, I'm from Florida, so like that was like you had to hide it in the basements. You had to, hang with your friends, whatever. But like you watch movies and how criminal, like just all the people that are in jail for it now. But now we can just talk openly about it because we were in a certain state.
Yeah, well, we were in Northern Virginia, which is 20 minutes outside of D.C., and it's a Commonwealth state. I don't think a lot of people know. They like run everything. It's such a racket. Like it's just everything. I hated that state so much. I was like, I need to get away, which is how we ended up here. My husband's from here.
Yeah.
He's been desperately trying to get back, and I was like, you know what? I would just love to leave because before my husband and I got together, I had gone on a trip to California with a friend who's no longer a friend. And it was actually a really pivotal moment in our relationship, and I almost never came back from that trip. I almost stayed in California because I was like, this is where I'm supposed to be.
Okay.
I found out on that trip that someone had hit my car and I had to come back home.
Bring it on back.
Yeah. But I was literally like, okay, I'll go fix my car and I'll drive straight back to LA.
Yeah.
And it was just like a shitty trip. Came back home, had to deal with that. Was going through the stuff with my friend and I wanted to buy some weed. And I hit up my husband's roommate at the time who was in Florida in a Disney World trip. And I was like, great. He's like, but Kevin's home.
Mm-hmm.
And literally from that day forward, my husband and I have been together and my whole life changed, moving to Colorado and everything. And it really just sparked the whole like entrepreneur journey because to be in a new state where nobody knows you, it's like starting fresh. It's like, I can do anything. And what do I want to do right now?
Have you ever thought about going back to Cali?
We've had this talk. My husband has done a really good job at convincing me not to.
I also think nowadays Cali is
that's what it
different
is. That's the argument
Cali.
he makes all the time. He's like, you want him to go to like 2010 before Cali. And I'm like,
I've been
you're
many
so right.
times and I can see it just changing and now people are leaving, you know.
They're coming here.
Yeah.
I do think Denver's going to be something. Yeah.
I was like, it's not for me.
Yeah.
I do believe it might be hopefully the next big thing. The problem is like Georgia is doing a great job because of state taxes and the way they manage that, and hopefully Colorado can be the next type of venture. But I mean,
We'll see.
There's got to be a lot of leadway and a lot of change that need to be done. But that's even if they're even going after that, because I think that a lot of states nowadays are trying to stay they don't want people coming over. We don't want tourists. Ski season, perfect. But other than that,
sure. I was just saying, the resort stuff want everybody to come. But.
Yeah, but governors and mayors, I don't know if they're going to want, California. We say it all the time, like, where are you from, California? Oh,
yeah.
The traffic's getting bad, population's getting bad, so it's one of those things that I think is going to benefit all of us as, people in the media department that we can grow off of, especially in the film industry. That would be amazing.
Say Colorado has expanded a lot in terms of, like, just cultural aspect overall.
I always laugh and I'm like, I feel like I'm living in Northern Virginia in like the 90s, 2000s out here sometimes, but I see how much people are really trying to make things happen.
For sure.
And I'm like, you know what? Like, Northern Virginia, when I was growing up to where I got to when I grew up, I was like, it wasn't terrible. There was so much thriving. I was like, if that's what's about to happen here, like, then it's a really good time to be here and establish something.
Yeah.
So when it comes into your entrepreneurship, what kind of moves did you make that made you want to get into the media aspect of growing a business?
So I was always like modeling, trying to get into acting and films, like really always been the end goal. And then as I got older...
Were you doing this during the time of also doing massage?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I was actually really more so when I moved to Colorado, because I think I was always doing small gigs here and there.
Yeah.
But I had a lot of self-esteem issues, and so I just wouldn't. Like, I would flake. You would have hated me. I would flake on photo shoots because
I know a lot of people like that. So.
I just had so much going on, and Colorado really just changed so much for me because I was discovering myself. I was on a healing journey. There was just so many different things that were happening. So with that, I was learning to love myself, like myself, and just try new things. I didn't care if I failed. And so I got in on my first film project, which was a personal project of the director. I got to meet a lot of really amazing people, work with amazing people, and I realized, I was like, it might not be acting, though I was doing great. I was like, I think I really, really love this whole idea of like a crew and working together and making stuff happen. So creative direction, I think, has really always been what I've been meant to do. But photography, videography, all these things, if I didn't dive into them, I don't think they really would have showed me that.
Right. Well, even on film sets, like, you have to wear multiple hats when you're doing the business yourself. You're doing the project yourself. And I think that a lot, when people realize, and that's why a lot of people stop doing what they want to do, especially with creativity wise, is because they get into the zone where they see people's material on social media and they're like, I want to do that, but I can't because I don't have this and that, whatever. So what you're doing, basically what we're all doing, is we're going after things that because we want to, that's our dream. Yeah. And if we don't do that kind of situation, it eats you inside. Like, there's been many times where if I don't do something, as in just being progressive, it just makes you feel like a piece of shit. I feel like that. I wouldn't say depressed, but there's a sadness that kicks in your heart. It's
totally depression. For sure.
Yeah. There's a clinical depression, and I don't want that to be confused, but I want to get to the point where it's like, if you don't bust your ass and just do something and create something that you can be proud of, you can hold tangible, or even on something you can look at constantly. There's some people who don't have that bone in their body. They don't want to. They want to work a 9 to 5. They want to work a job, a paycheck, a 401k, and that's completely normal. But if you're being eaten inside because of something that you're not doing naturally or something creatively, then those are the aspects that you want to kind of just take and just say fuck it and just run with it, Yeah. And if you don't, then you're going to regret it. We've had this talk before. It's like, push yourself to the ultimate max. Do something you can absolutely do. Do what you want to do. And if it bites you in the ass, at least you can say, I did it. Because no one ever says they regret doing something they love or trying it. It's always the vice versa. You're going to be that age where, granted, you have kids, so you're doing something to the point where people make that excuse. People say I can't do that kind of stuff because I have kids, because I have to take care of them and do that kind of, do that kind of, taking care of other people. So, that's not an excuse for a lot of people. It's an excuse that people want to use because they don't really want to go for it. It's like when you ask someone you want to make a movie, people want to be on the screen, but they don't want to make the movie, So you have to find people that are going to push you, drive you, and put you in a situation where you can find resources and collaborate and find a support system. And I think that's what you need to do, and that's what we all need to do, and that's what you've kind of you found that passion into like a creative director where you build a team around.
I love what you just said, because that support, if I didn't start being true to myself, I would have never found those people.
Right.
Yeah.
And then like last year when I started showing up online, I was doing what I thought would attract the right people, and it wasn't being true to myself. Like I was still being myself, but I wasn't fully myself, right? And I was like, okay, let me put on a blazer, let me get dressed up, let me, do what all the other female entrepreneurs are doing, and it felt so unnatural.
For sure.
Like I was just
less
like,
catering
what am I
to you
doing?
and trying to get that person to really pay attention.
Well, that's what's crazy is you're self-marketing. You're something that you're not. And I
For
think
sure.
that's why, it's just like when you first came in, you were like, I don't know if I want to get this because that's a trend nowadays. And I think that you can either go with the trend and kind of get lost in the mix, or you do have that uniqueness that you can bring, Like there's been many ideas that I have that's, that's stealing. You're stealing from an artist. All ideas are stealing. It's just about building that mountain of different ideas and building your own. So it's like, you can wear the blazer, you can, fit that part, but if it doesn't feel like you.
Stolen. I always say all ideas are remixed. I think everything is a remix, because like DJing, I love to DJ, and I'm like, well, that's kind of how DJing came to be. You know what I mean?
Pretty much,
The thing about, if you want to use the remix aspect of it, so if you're a music producer, you have to use material. You have to have access. You have to have permission. But you have the permission to have that kind of stuff. So when you steal something, as in, obviously we've already quoted this before. It's not copywriting, whatever. But you steal ideas. You can steal. You're not stealing material necessarily.
It's a collection of several
It's a collection
ideas.
of things.
Yeah.
You can use remix, absolutely. But whatever word that you want to use, it kind of, as long as you're going for it and taking from other people. Kanye West is one of the best examples. All the mixes he did, all the samples, the greatest samples, Gold Digger, all stuff is remixing into his own style. The problem is nowadays a lot of people in this generation, they don't know those originalities. They don't know those things.
They think he created technologic. I was like, guys, hold up.
And that's the great thing about what people can do on many different streaming services, and anything that we do is you're not taking credit for it, but you're using someone else's information, their materials, their sources, and creating yourself. And I think that's what a lot of people need to do. The greatest directors, the greatest superstars in the world, basketball players, they copy someone, you learn from someone, and then you create your style. Dancing, you follow, you stomp your feet, you do what you have to do. You follow someone's rules, and then you start building your personal traits and
Copy
make it
the
more.
experts and then build upon it.
Exactly. And I think that's how we can learn, because if you don't have that mentality, I think it's, if you only go, I only do what I want to do and I don't want to learn from anybody, then those are the people who are not doing things.
Those are people not learning.
Exactly. That's why we read books. That's why we watch, documentaries, or you have to learn from people's mistakes, and you have to learn what works, and then you start adding your nooks and crannies to build a really good recipe.
I really, really lean into that, because I think it goes with surrounding yourself with the right people. It's also what you listen to, what you watch. Like those things really, really play a huge role. And it wasn't until I started listening to podcasts, reading books more, it's harder now with kids, which is why Audible is like a saint.
Yeah, for sure.
But if it wasn't for those stuff, it really sets my day. You know what I mean? Like it can change my whole way of thinking just by listening to one podcast.
Absolutely.
And so, I'm very, very, I think that's a part of things that needs to be included in people's habits.
Yeah. And and when it goes into that support system, it's so critical, because like me and my brother, we've tried to make movies where it's just me and him. And you have to wear all the hats. You got to set the lighting and the microphone. You got to have the script. You got to have, the tone, the mood, all that stuff. And having to do all by yourself is so detrimental to the brain. Like your motivation, like everything that you want, like that project in your head, if you can't get that on a piece of paper or on a screen, and it doesn't look the way you want to look, and you're very, me and him are both very OCD like with our stuff, that if it does, it's trash. We don't want anything to do with it. We don't release it. It's nothing. But when you have a support system, we've both worked on a cruise where we've had a lot of different people wearing different hats. just like you want to do, creative director, where you can say, hey, can you do this? Hey, can you do this? But that goes with everything in life. Yeah. If your partner can't pick up the parts that you don't want to, and you guys can mix and match, if you're the only one doing stuff, you're not going to want to do this anymore because it's too stressful. It's too mundane. And I think a lot of people get into that spectrum of if they can't do it by themselves. I was scared to ask for help for a long time. I didn't want to ask for help. When it came to finances, when it came to physical training, I didn't want to get a coach. I didn't want to get, be a part of a team. I don't need a fucking team to go running. But that's why the greatest athletes in the world have coaches. 13 different coaches. So there's never going to be a moment in your life where you can it's better off doing it by yourself. Unless, I think one of the only things that I kind of see it is probably writing. Like you kind of have to, you take your material. Yeah. You gotta run, you gotta, hide away. The greatest authors in the world, for a long, long time, they hide away in a hotel room. They hide away in a room, but then they come back, but it's finding your ability to teach yourself certain things, but you gotta have a support system.
I agree.
I think there's like 2 points with that. I know starting off, everyone should definitely build upon themselves, learn everything as much as they can, because I think that would be huge. But then growing, eventually finding that support is definitely going to be key in terms of achieving more success.
Yeah. I feel bad for people that don't, because I get it, right? You want to do everything yourself. You don't want to ask for help. But imagine all the other creators who are just like you, needing help, wanting help. And if you guys just helped each other, we could all get there.
For sure. My cousin, he lives in Cali right now. And the coolest thing that he found, which he found after I left, but it's this thing called collaborative collective or something like that. Mm-hmm. Basically, giant group of artists. They all come together and they meet at one location, and they'll all just take turns letting someone go on stage and play.
That's
I was like, that's huge. And then they'll all, everyone's sharing. They'll record each other, things like that. One person brings this to the table, the other person brings that. I think that's definitely something Colorado could use itself as well. I know when I was first working in music, I think out here it was a little less supportive, at least that's how it felt in terms of finding connections. But I did happen to find a few that led me to some of those shows that I did in the past. Yeah. But music's something else too.
Yeah. It is, yeah. It's interesting. It's funny, they're called collaborative
collection or something like that.
Well, there's a dance studio that I go to and that I love called Collaboratory Complex, and it's by a girl named Jasmine Laresmith. Her and her mom created it, but it's like a creator workspace. Yeah. So if you're a photographer, videographer, stuff like that, like they have spaces for you to rent. They're really trying to just create this collective space of like-minded people who want to do those things, and I just think that's beautiful because
for sure
I feel awkward going to your average co-working space and recording, because I feel like I'm bothering the people that came there and also paid for their time to work. And I'm like, man, like we really need creator spaces,
Well, a lot of times I've been in the areas where they're just working and they're just doing things and borrowing. Like in order to be creative, like it's a talking mechanism. Yeah. You can get your own rooms, I can, but it's one of the things getting everybody to be a part of system. There needs to be, I know there probably is. There's a group of people where you can just feed off the energy. Like I'm part of there's a Denver filmmaking type of chat room that you can talk to and build off of that one. But it's the matter of reaching out and doing it. And I remember for the longest time I had trouble, like until I went to New York, where like you have to be that person or you get lost. You're a tadpole in a pond or an ocean. Yeah. So you have to reach out to people. And if you don't, then you'll never get paid. You'll never work with anybody you want to. You'll never do anything that you want to. So it's just reaching out and building a support system that that can drive you home. If your parents add a certain characteristic to yourself that you can kind of bleed off of someone else, like there's always going to be a support system, and you can always tell the people who didn't have that from their parents. It kind of they're going to feed off their parents, and they're going to become that person, and they're going to start leading off to being scared and asking for help, and especially with creativity too. So
for sure.
But what it does come with what got you into the point of the acting material, like modeling? Let's go back to that. We mentioned a little bit what kind of got you into that point. What
You know
brought
what's
you there?
funny? I feel like a lot of things that we do is because of a few things, right? It's what we think we should do, it's what others expect us to do, and then there's this whole, like, I'm just going to try it, right? So I feel like it was a mix of all three, because my whole life I was told, oh, you're so pretty, you should model. Which I think is, like, looking back now, it was all told by older men, so that's a little creepy. But, you know, it was just one of those things where I also think it kind of creates this wrong mindset for a young girl to have, because it's like telling me that, okay, that the only thing that I can do in this life is get far with my looks. If that's what everyone keeps telling me. I grew up a tomboy, so like my mom like hated that because
Does it piss you off when people tell you to smile when you don't smile?
It used to. Now I'm just like, oh, I'm not smiling. Like, I forgot.
I used to work in like the serving industry, and then there would be people say, I'm like, just leave them the fuck. You try doing our job and smiling about it, okay?
All the time. You'd be so much prettier if you smiled. Yeah. That's usually what they would say.
Gee, thanks.
Yeah, all the things. I mean, I get it. Like, I don't take personal offense like most women do these days, and I completely understand why they do. You know, you're now finding your voice, you're now finally standing up for things you probably couldn't when you were younger. But I think everything in this life is how you choose to handle your situations, sure. Right? Because people are going to be who they are. How you react is the most important. But with the modeling and stuff, I'll actually go into like one of the best quotes that somebody ever told me, and he was like, you have to get comfortable with getting uncomfortable. And I was like, oof, that's a deep one. And it took me years to really understand what he meant by that. Like, if it's something that, I'll say it like this, if you're trying to do anything and all of your little pop blockers come up, right, for like, oh, we shouldn't do this because of this, oh, we shouldn't do this because of that, I've had to retrain my mind to just be like, we're just going to jump. Yeah. Because sometimes you have to. I mean, granted, you should have like some sense of direction, right? But it's how I found my husband. I said yes to dates I never wanted to go on just because I wanted to learn about other people and myself.
It's crazy because like I'll listen to podcasts about people that are so like famous, wealthy, that are in that type of I guess you say the same bracket that we kind of like wisdom and inspiration. Yeah. They say the same shit. Like I listen to Mel Robbins, and she's still like those negative thoughts. You're like, don't do it, and then they have to ponder it in. Rich Roll has the same thing. All these people that we admire have those type of tendencies of having that negative thought, that subconscious thought. For sure. And I feel like it never go away, but it's just about the more you act on it.
I think an interesting point you made too was that leap of faith type of deal, because I've had many people ask me. Like, I used to be incredibly shy. Like, I was telling Sean before, when I was younger, during one of my birthdays, I was like maybe 12 or 13, had all my family gathered around me, and they're singing Happy Birthday. Yeah. Broke out in tears. So I was always that shy kid growing up. But when I did my first show, everyone was like, oh, I can never do that. How'd you do that? That's amazing. That's crazy. I was like, it was just a click, just go, jump into it. And then that was the most, like, amazing feeling I ever had in my life, and that just opened me up more, and I think that definitely brought me out of my shell a lot too.
Well, I think it's because you went after something that you truly love,
for sure,
and the information that you have makes you feel, like just like if you're talking about fitness or nutrition, if someone came to you and said, hey, can you, even as being an introvert, like the knowledge that like it can lead your conversations, it can make you feel like you're I guess more social than you actually are. And I think when you activate that type of...
For sure. It was like the mix of the love of wanting to do it felt stronger than the fear of just not doing it.
Right.
So I was like, all right, let's just jump into this.
Absolutely.
And got on stage, and it was actually one of the first songs I was rapping out. Forgot the lyrics to it. I was like, oh God, started freaking, just kept going. No one knows.
Nowadays, you can just mumble it and people are like, yeah. So what are some of the, being an entrepreneur, what are some of the pros and cons to, I mean, I think we all have our own pros and cons, but I think coming from a different type of perspective is knowing what type of, and how you deal with those, and what inspires you to keep moving on and not just say, hey, fuck it, I'm going to get a normal job.
I haven't had a job since 2017, and maybe it's pride, but I'm like, I'm never getting a job again.
I don't like listening to people.
That's
I don't
a huge part of it. However,
I gotta be careful.
I have kind of changed my mind a bit in the sense of, because I really, really do love working with teams and working with people. I want to build my own at some point. But sometimes, I'm really, really big on practicing humility. So if I need to lower myself to learn something again, to do better, I will definitely do that. And if that means like working with a team for 6 months to do this job, I know that delegate and whatnot. Yeah, and I know that I'll like benefit from that because of what I'm learning. So I don't rule it out. Like I don't look at it as a job. I look at it as an opportunity, you know what I mean? Or a project or something like that. And I think, it's interesting because I know most people will say it's like a privilege, and I'm like, well, I worked hard to get to this state to even feel that way, because money can control a lot of decisions, and when you run your decisions by fear, right, then you make the wrong decisions, and I've done that majority of my life. It's like the one thing like I'm working so hard at to not do anymore. Because, you have a family, you have kids, you have things to worry about. But I'm like, well, if I go back to this state of mind, I'm going to make bad decisions and I'm going to go into a hole and it's not going to help me. So I think having your habits, your goals, your strategies, like all these things really do play a role in how you're going to move forward. Sometimes we have no idea because you're figuring things out or you're learning something. And I've been there and trying to, say, okay, I'm going to do this. And then I did it and I realized, maybe I didn't like it, or it's not that I didn't like it. I just realized it wasn't what fueled me the way that I wanted to. Right. So yeah, at the end of the day, it's all trusting the process, right? Enjoying the journey and not putting so much pressure on yourself. I think that's the biggest one. For sure. Because if you give yourself these unrealistic expectations, you're going to fail. Yeah. Like I'm a firm believer in that. So I'm very half and half with like go with the flow, but also have a system, because if you don't, you're just going to find yourself in the same routine.
Yeah. I'm sure it can be also like it's great working with the team, but it can also be very nerve-wracking because you have so many moving parts at that point too.
I've had bad experiences. For the most part, I've had great experiences. I'm such a giver. I really, really love helping people. And it's not even that I'm a people pleaser. Maybe I was. I don't think I am as much anymore. Right. But if I see like another young female entrepreneur, or just any entrepreneur really, that's trying something and I want to help, I usually will. I'll throw work their way or things in that nature. And I had a really bad experience where I helped someone and they like went behind my back to that client and they both ended up doing their own thing, which was fine. And I'm very grateful it happened because it put me onto a new path. Right. But things happen and, don't let it discourage you. It's normal. It's all a part of your growth and entrepreneur process. And it's going to teach you. I think failure is success. I'll say it like that. Failure is success. So every time you fail at something, it's just you learning how to go about it the next time.
For sure. Yeah. For sure. Do you have anything that you're working on right now that's really exciting for you?
I'm working on so many things, guys. But one, I'm working on a film that Sean's actually going to be an extra in, and if you want to, because we're always looking for extras. It's with a photographer and filmmaker. His name is Brian Hollowell. And funny story. So when I was modeling out here, I connected with Brian. Always wanted to work with each other. Never got a chance to. Reached out again when I was pregnant with my third child, just to try to set things up to try to work with each other, because I was now behind the scenes. We had talked a few times, never ended up working together. And then I think it was last month in December, he hit me up. He's like, hey, I have this gig with Logitech.
Hope you're enjoying the episode so far. Just wanted to take a brief moment to say thank you for tuning into this episode of our podcast. We hope you're enjoying the content, finding it informative and entertaining. But if you're looking for more, be sure to check out the video version of this episode on our YouTube channel as well. We have lots of great content, so be sure to subscribe, hit that notification bell, stay up to date on all of our latest releases. And again, thank you for listening. Now we'll get back to the show.
And it just blew my mind, because I was like, oh, this is a big name brand. Yeah. It would really help, to have that in my portfolio. But most importantly, I get to work with Brian. And then I learned that Brian's assistant was Jake Blackson, and I'm a huge fan.
Absolutely.
I'm so sorry. I said Jake Blackson because that used to be his Instagram name. His name is actually Blake Jackson, but like we call him Blackson.
So, I was like, I don't know. I've never met a guy named
we call him Blackson.
That's a weird name.
Yeah, no. Well, it used to be his old Instagram name.
Gotcha.
But regardless, these are two people that I had been wanting to work with for a while, and if it wasn't for putting myself out there, I don't think it would have ever happened.
Well, I'd love to
and it
have
was years
Brian
later.
on too, because just talking about filmmaking in general
Absolutely.
would be a key for me.
So doing that short film, I'm the casting director for it, so that's really exciting because I love being behind the scenes and doing all that. So yeah, that's the big one right now, but there's so many other things that I'm working on.
I get you. Would you kind of make like the shift into learning more of that kind of background stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, being a director is probably like a filmmaker, right? I think film's changed my life in so many ways. It's the main passion. I don't think it's ever changed because every other thing that I do falls into that, right? Choosing music, like it all goes together, the acting, the modeling. So I'm like, I always said when I was younger, people were like, what do you want to be? I'm like, I want to be an actor so I can do everything.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, well, I don't want to be an actor. I don't mind it. I don't mind acting, but I just love putting people together and like
building that world.
Yeah, because I have that eye.
Yeah.
And I think you should lean into where your strengths are, you know? So
that's the biggest thing for me. I've always wanted to be a filmmaker. Well, I consider myself a filmmaker. Once you do something or make an action towards it, you know, I was in New York, we were making short films, feature films, music videos. And there's the passion that I had for that was basically creating, what I loved most about it was creating a tone, creating an emotion that made someone emotional, whether if it was a horror movie, making them scream, if it was a drama, making them cry. But there is a beautifulness when it comes into being on set and watching pieces of the puzzle formulate and start seeing that picture that puzzle starts to create. It gives you this overwhelming ability, just like imagine putting out your album. You know, and the great thing about back then, it was like an actual album, like you can actually see a CD disc. And I think when it was tangible, it was just so much more power. Now it's like, oh, done, got it, it's online. And I think it kind of lost that little spectrum, but it also made it easier for people that felt like they weren't capable of doing it, that they can just put their stuff out there and build on it, you know? So it's a beautiful thing creating, and when you can see it on a screen, you know.
I remember being in the streets of Denver and I printed out like 100 CDs. I would just go out there and just start handing them out. It's
like, do it.
Hell yeah, sometimes you just got to get out there and hustle a little bit.
I'm a firm believer in hustling. I know there's some people that don't care for hustle culture, but I think hustle culture is for yourself.
For sure.
It's not for anyone. You know what I mean? So I think it's really like an entrepreneurship journey. There's a way to hustle and not like be so like out of whack and crazy. If that makes it's about having a system.
Well, no, yeah. If you wait for something to happen, if you put out something and then you're just like, I hope it builds, you know, and you sit back. If you're not doing the grinding and you're hustling and you're putting your shit into motion, then if it ever does happen, you're decreasing the rate by a rapid amount. So always trying to be active and always trying to push and you know, there's so many different sources now. There's so many different ways to get your material out. And just trying to don't be scared, and who gives a shit about what people think? You're doing it for yourself. You know, you hope people like it. It's for them, but I know it's Seth Gordon. He never listened. He never read any of his negatives. Stephen Pressfield never read a single negative. He didn't care about those people because it's not for them. Yeah. You know, like if you didn't like it, it wasn't for them. Yeah. But you can't learn from a negative. You can't say, hey, you shouldn't do this, or I don't care about that. You're going to change for that one person. You know, so it's like, look at what the positive people around you, your support system, your friends, your family, your listeners, your followers, and if they enjoy your material, if they can reach out and they felt like they were inspired or they were motivated or they felt, you know, that they can go after what they want to do, just like, you know, all of us, just like that stealing from someone allowed you to feel like you can move on forward and be creative. There's many different ways, but it comes down to the hustle. It's the hustle and grind.
Sometimes I think the negative can be good, and I do think we can learn from it because, for example, if it's maybe it comes across negative, but it challenges you to think outside the box. Sometimes.
Constructive criticism.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Negative. The way I look at it, and I think is like you're a piece of shit.
Garbage,
you suck.
Yeah.
Like when someone says you suck. Like when someone says you just suck. That's not like there's nothing benefit. You can't help. And then if you have someone who's not doing what you're now, if it's someone that you admire and saying, hey, you shouldn't do this, you should do that, constructive criticism. Right. But if someone who's just sitting on the computer looking at your stuff and go, this sucks, like you can't learn from that person. So there's no point of, especially when you're growing a brand or you're growing a name or you're growing a business or a company, if you follow those people, then you can be like, you know what, maybe I do. And it can mess you up. Constructive criticism, absolutely, 100%. Some people can't give you really good constructive criticism. They feel like, they have a different approach. But if you don't learn from constructive criticism, then you'll never find out what the true path is.
I think that's honestly probably one of the first steps in entrepreneurship is being able to accept that, because if you don't, this is a very cutthroat industry.
For sure.
And I think sometimes cancel culture and stuff try to change it. I'm like, I don't think you guys understand until you've walked the path for why certain things are in place or whatever. But it's just entrepreneurship is truly, I think, one of the best journeys any of us could ever have. At least for me, because I didn't want to work for somebody else. I was one of those people who went above and beyond in all of my jobs, and it didn't pay off. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. One, because I didn't have a college degree. Two, I would do the work that someone who was getting paid salary wouldn't do, right?
Of course.
They would take the credit and they would make my life a living hell. Right. So I remember the day I used to work at 24/7 In Touch for the Netflix campaign. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot of customer service, right? It was a great company. It was a lot of fun. But there was one day, it was January 1st, 2017. And I called my boss and I said, I'm not coming in. He's like, today? And I was like, no, I'm not coming back, ever. And I could tell it was this bittersweet moment where he's like, I get it. Mm-hmm. I wish you the best, but wish you didn't quit like this kind of thing. But it was just I literally woke up and I was staring at the ceiling and I was like, I'm not doing this again. Right. You just reach your point, I think. Yeah. And once you've reached your point, then you'll walk that path.
Did you get into a lot of the filmmaking when you first came here?
Yes. Okay. And it's so funny because I found an old video from 2010 with me and a group of friends. And it was one of these little flip video things. And I found a video on there and I played it. And it's a video of me, one of my best friends, and another childhood friend. And I was talking at the time about starting a YouTube video and how I want to make videos. And he's like, then do it. And it really brought me to tears because watching in that moment what my friend was trying to tell me that I just wasn't getting and clicking, that I was like, man, if I had started this journey back then. But I wasn't in the right state of mind. It's that
all negative, that negative thought process.
It really, really was. But it was it wasn't registering to him what he was telling me. He was like, you need to just do it. And I was like, I can't just do it. He's like, you so literally have a camera.
That. Just do it. So easy to say that, but you don't know what I have to go through.
Yeah, and I was victim mentality. I was totally being that person. And it's so funny because we're friends today. And to see me doing it now, he's just about time. You know what I mean? But it's also one of those things where if, again, like I said, if I didn't dive into it, I don't think I really would have figured out what the true passion is, which is creative direction and bringing people together and creating art. Because I've understood I can't do it all myself, but I know it needs to be done. Yeah. And if I just pick the right people, magic can happen.
So who are some of the influences that kind of led you in the right direction, whether if it's through entrepreneurship or through creativity?
So many people. It's funny because as a woman of color, it's actually been a lot of white males, which has been very interesting for me. And I think it's because it's been a lot of my masculine energy, how I was raised, how I think. So, people like Joe Rogan was someone who I was listening to for a while, and I can take him in doses for the most part, because everyone has their own style.
Yeah.
But what he was doing with bringing on different types of people and the people that I was learning from on those podcasts is what really like changed things for me. Issa Rae, I'm not sure if you know who she is. She's a female director. She did Insecure on HBO. She's just done so many different projects, and as a Black female in the industry to do the things that she's done has truly been admirable, and it's kind of made me it's given me a lot more faith, because unfortunately I think a big reason why I did stay away from the industry is because I felt like it was very male dominated, and I felt like I was always looked at as a pretty face, never really taken seriously, didn't want to be put in situations where it's a casting couch. So, that's obviously perspective from a woman's side of things. But then I just started reading books from other actors. Like, I'm not sure if you read Will Smith's book. Loved that book. I really, really did. And there's another one, which doesn't really go into film. It's How to Tell Your Story Brand by Donald Miller. Okay. But he goes into film and how it all relates. And it's all about branding. It's the same stuff that Will Smith talks about. So it's a variety of people. But I think what really, there's one person that really changed everything for me. And it was Gary Vee. And it's funny because a lot of people that I talk to now, they're like, I hate Gary Vee. And I was one of those people. I was like, I hate Gary Vee. And I had a friend who was like, have you listened to him? And so I listened, and I listened again, and I was like, okay, let's see what else we got here. And I was like, wow, this guy's not as bad as I thought. We're actually a lot alike. I really like this. And so that's what really got me to start my business and everything.
Yeah, his books, Punch, Jab, Jab. Well, just listen to him. It's I think people think he's just so egotistical. And I think the way he comes off, but when you get to know him, he's just so passionate about whatever he wants to do. And he gave the same, when I found him out a long, long time ago, it was, what I learned most from him was, no matter what your excuse is, it's bullshit. No matter what you think is, because he'll ask people, what do you got? And I want to do this, but I can't do this. He goes, bullshit, this is how you do it, blah, blah, blah. Next. It wasn't like, hey, listen to my course and I'll show you how to fix it. Right. He'll just tell them exactly what they need to do. And then he goes, are you doing this? Are you posting every day? Are you doing that? Then you're not doing what you need to do. So it made you feel and I think those are the people who hate him, made them feel well, you don't know, my story's different, and there's always going to be that struggle that someone has, but he had the ability to say, whatever it is so small, it's stupid, just do it. And just like you said, if you did it 10 years ago, if you did it a year ago, imagine where we'd be right now.
Yeah.
For sure. He definitely drives in that, just fuck it, just hop on there, hit record, just start doing it.
Yeah, he's really big on humility, and I'm also big on humility, and I think that was where I had to be okay, you don't know everything. It's okay. It's okay to learn from others. It's okay to make mistakes. I think growing up, which I'm sure you know, East Coast, it's very, what's the word? It's just tough in how you're perceived. So growing up in the 90s and 2000s on the East Coast, you had to dress a certain way, look a certain way, be a certain way. And that was really instilled in me for the longest time, which is why I just wanted to get out of the East Coast. Now I appreciate it when I go back there. I truly enjoy it.
It's a good vacation.
Yeah, it's a really good vacation. It's so funny though, because Gary Vee is the reason I moved back to the East Coast in my mom's basement. Yeah, he was move back in with your parents. It was the biggest, toughest decision ever. I didn't have to.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad I did, because I started my business.
Absolutely. I was in the same situation. We were living in Florida with me and my girlfriend. There was nothing that we wanted to do there. You can't be a filmmaker or be a creative person who wants to grow a brand in Florida at the time that we left. I mean, you could. I mean, there's people out there, but it's a lot harder. So we made the decision, let's go to New York. Let's go live there. Let's go after. She's a phenomenal hairdresser. She wanted to, to really expand her career in that department, own her own business, and I wanted to be a filmmaker. I wanted to be a photographer. I wanted to be a director, producer, screenwriter. I wanted to do it all. So we moved to New York thinking that we had jobs lined up. We were supposed to have our jobs just transferred over there just to make some money and then build our own, our own brand or our own personal development business, whatever we wanted to do. And the job wasn't there. So we maxed out all of our credit cards. We had 45 days of no paycheck coming in, no job or anything. We were living off of rice and beans. We had nothing. We had 2 big ass 80-pound dogs that we had to support too. They ate better than we did. But it got to the point when we finally did get our jobs, we got it situated. We told ourselves, we'll never be in this situation again. We will never let ourselves be in such a shitty situation, living in a shitty apartment. Because, New York, I mean, you can spend what you buy in some places a whole house compared to what you would buy in rent. So we were living in this 250 square foot studio apartment in Brooklyn, in Bed-Stuy, and with 2 dogs. And we were like, don't worry about it. We got 1 year. We're going to get out of it. We're going to muster everything up. We're going to do whatever we have to do. Work 9 to 5. We're going to do all of our side gigs when we need to. I opened up my own photography studio and filmmaking studio. We were making music videos. We were doing everything. It was blowing up. We were making so much money. And then COVID hit. And then that industry, both industries that we wanted to be in, you can't be in the same room with anybody. No. Yeah. And in New York, it was different. It wasn't like Florida or in the, it kind of like 6 months later started, that scariness, that fear that people had about the pandemic kind of hit the West Coast a little bit differently. But in New York, where, you have all the airplanes from different, countries, China, all that, they came from there. So we got hit the hardest. We were seeing dead bodies rolling out on gurneys into, gigantic semi-trucks. So it's like we felt like as that happened, our dreams, like everyone's dreams, just kind of, we don't know. Like we thought it was like, we'll see you in 2 weeks. We're gonna go to Ohio with our family and just kind of wait for this to die down. Months, 6 months, 12 months. It took almost, I think it was a year and a half, almost 2 years for New York to even really open up again. Yeah. And it was like we went back there to go get all of our stuff, and it was a ghost town. New York City. I have pictures of nobody in New York City for the first time. That must have been
like the best time to take photos.
It was. Like who? Nobody's bothering you. Nothing's in the way. It was actually clean.
Yeah, for once.
But yeah, like being in that type of environment and being from the bottom to the ground up, there's going to be some type. It's just how you handle it. It's how you handle negativity and those distractions. When it comes into, you mentioned Gary Vee, but what are some of the things that kind of push you to keep going? Now, you don't have to use people. You can use books. You could do whatever. But what kind of keeps you going? And what kind of advice do you have for someone, whether if it's a female Black entrepreneur, female entrepreneur, or an entrepreneur themselves? What kind of advice do you have to them starting a business in 2023? And what are some of the approaches that they can take to help grow their business?
Okay. I am a firm believer in having not necessarily a plan, because plans don't always go right how you want them to, but I do think you should have some sort of structure. So obviously being a mom, 3 kids under 5, my husband is amazing help. He's stay-at-home dad, actually, which has been phenomenal. And that was an interesting transition, too, because we didn't know how that was going to go. But work was picking up, and it just seemed like the best thing to do. But we are on a routine. Mm-hmm. We are a routine-based family. Like, my kids know, okay, bath time, we do this. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think time blocking is important, because you can't do everything at 9 o'clock I'm going to do this. But if I'm like, okay, between 6 and 9 in the morning, if I can knock out these things, I'll feel better about it. And then also getting into routine with so meditation and breath work have been something that have just changed my life. And what's interesting is that actually started when I started microdosing. And I started microdosing because, so I grew up with BPD, and I didn't get diagnosed until I was 18. But my family is very you don't have that, you're fine. If that makes any sense. That's just how we grew up and how it was. So I was never properly medicated or anything like that. And I don't know if you know anything about borderline personality disorder, but it is definitely like a daily struggle with like organizing your life, and then ADHD on top of it and dyslexia on top of it. So like managing my finances, like all these things were things where I was just like crumbling inside, because I'm like, these are basic tasks that anyone should be able to do, and I'm like struggling, you know? So with that, I had researched, because I'm very natural for the most part. I don't trust a lot of things that are given to us, especially for cheap or free. So with that, I just started researching natural stuff. I had been experiencing psilocybin for 10 plus years. And so with that, I was just like, well, I've never microdosed. I've never actually used this as like something that could change my life. And with all the research and stuff that I had done, I had a friend who grows some, but there's a company called Schedule 35, which you can buy from now. Sorry. And so I just started it out. It's like, okay, you know what? I'll do it for 30 days. Do it for 30 days. I did 4 days on, 2 days off. Man, a lot of shadow work, a lot of deep, like, personal stuff. But it was also, like, not as scary as you think it's going to be, at least for me, maybe just because where I've been in my journey and like wanting to get these things done, because that's a huge part. You have to want to make the changes. If you don't, it's just going to be painful. Right. It really, really is. The more you resist change and transformation, the harder it is. So since I knew I wanted change and I wanted to do things, I think using or microdosing just really helped me see things clearly. It helped me focus better. It helped me figure out, okay, like,
pay attention to the details. Yeah,
things that I just couldn't do on my own, which was such a struggle for me for so many years. Yeah. So with that, I was able to organize my life. I finally sat down and like started doing my finances without it, like...
You need microdosing to do your finances.
You do. You really, really do, if you're anything like me. No, but it's... it doesn't matter what type of healing you get. I think at the end of the day, it's you wanting and willing to do the work is the biggest part of it, because what I learned from it is that microdosing doesn't change your life. It's not a magic pill. Right. It just reveals what needs to be done. Right. And so with that, I was like, okay, I know what I need to do. And now you have to push yourself to do it, and you have to go through that journey. I grew up somewhat privileged, even though my life was very different. But with that, my dad, with him not being around, wanted to take care of us, and it drove my mom nuts, because she, you know, grew up in like a village, came from nothing. She's like, no, they need to learn how to cook, clean, this and that, blah, blah, blah. So I'm very, very grateful for that balance of the two, because though I grew up privileged, my mom made it sure that we didn't. So it was just this really, really unique balance. But at the end of the day, like I said, it's about doing the work. It really is. And trusting yourself, giving yourself grace, right? Not being too hard on yourself. I always say talk kindly to yourself, because I did not for many, many years. That negative mindset, just, you're your own worst enemy. So,
do you think some of the microdosing has helped in this aspect?
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. I'm like, so what I love about it is that, you know, I used it to the point where I didn't need it anymore. Okay. And that's the beauty in plant medicine. I think there's a lot of medications where people rely on their medication. After 60 days, I was like, I'm good.
So when you decided to start, what kind of, I don't know, I guess, what kind of led you in that direction where you felt like that was
the answer for me?
Not the answer, but an excellent way to find, to build your own journey.
You know, I always say, like, the universe pushes things in my direction, because I'm pretty spiritual like that. And there was just things that in my world that were popping up for it. And I wanted to do it, but I kept getting pregnant. So it wasn't that I couldn't. It wasn't that I couldn't. Apparently, like,
Jesus Christ.
I have a friend who owns a ayahuasca retreat in Colombia. It's been in her family for many, many years, and I always go to her for advice and stuff. And I love her response is, "It's medicine." She's like, "It's not gonna harm you."
Did you take it as part of like your daily routine, or did you ever go to like a place to kind of relax?
I've done small ceremonies. I've never done a big one, just because I really want to go to hers, because I trust her.
We have a trip coming up. I think that's what we're gonna do. I think we should all go there and see what this whole thing is about.
I love
if Aaron Rodgers can be a 2-time MVP, it can help him. It can help us.
For sure.
I just think there's just this bad stigma on plant medicine and what it can do. And
Cannabis and mushrooms have a completely different. Like my dad came by and he visited, and he was like, and me and my brother will, at night. Obviously, it's completely legal in Denver.
No.
But he's just like, he had that mentality of how he grew up, like where it was like the '70s show, where everybody go downstairs, they act stupid, they go in a circle, they don't remember where they're at, or they're acting lazy, they don't know. I mean, that's how I kind of looked at it when I first got.
As a pothead.
Of course.
Well, yeah, but there are potheads, So when that's the 100% of people that like I would, go to my friend's house and he'd have like 8 or 9 people, and then they'd all be just like, hey man, what's up? And if you had that spectrum, to me as a person, I'm like, I have to be progressive. Like I said, if I'm not progressive, I'm depressive. So when it came to it, I was like, I don't want nothing to do with this. This is terrible. And then I started learning about the benefits of it. And, like when medical marijuana became like where everybody had their card, and I wanted to figure out why was Michael Phelps doing it? Why are athletes doing it? Is it handle stress? Is it to handle the inflammation? Is it so you learn about it before you hate something, Same thing with shrooms. People have that thing where it's like, and I looked at, you can go there and look at 1950s and 60s ads about marijuana and cannabis and how it's like it makes women crazy. Like it literally, there's posters they used to post up.
I think it's the best medicine. Women
absolutely
for
sure. People would rather have pharmaceuticals than cannabis because that's television. FDA, the biggest money marketing scheme, and on majority of occasions, there's a lot of cannabis can't help, but I get it. But
I hate the FDA with a strong passion.
That's a whole nother podcast right there.
Say it.
But just that's one thing I hope people take from it is just broadening their knowledge and their perspective, and hopefully my dad kind of walked out and he was like, okay, I get it. Like he wanted to know why was my brother doing it? Why are you doing it? Whatever. And I was like, well, first of all, it helps me better. It sleeps better. It actually helps me calm down. I use it as an athlete. I use it for the benefit of reducing inflammation in the knees and the body in activity and sports. You can actually lower your heart rate without having it to peak to the point where you physically get exhausted. You overdrive. The fact that it doesn't. Now you can have too much of it, and then it can have too much of anything. You have too much sun, you get a sunburn. You get too much water at a contest, you can die. Yeah, like anything. Too much of anything is bad. But in moderation, in microdosing or whatever, I've had so many more benefit situations in my life than negatives. But back in the day, and even still in a lot of states, they look at it completely different.
Oh yeah,
for sure.
And I think a lot of that just comes with education. Like for the 10 plus years, I've literally been studying shrooms.
Yeah.
Like I've just wanted to know why, because ever since my first trip, it was just so. Obviously you're hallucinating, right? But spiritually, so many things were aligning, so many things were connecting. I'm like, okay, let's see what else. Let's see what else comes with this. And then I learned it's not about abusing the plant, which is what we were doing because no one properly taught us. But now with all the research and enough things, we're learning that there's people facilitating spaces for this, right?
Well, you worked in the cannabis industry.
I worked in the cannabis industry for a little bit, but I didn't have my badge just due to all the stuff that was going on. But I worked as a photographer. I worked in just helping different brands, and I used to trim for my friends, stuff like that. And I have friends that grow some, and I've always wanted to grow some myself, especially when I have my own farm. But it's more than that. There's for those who don't want to try psilocybin mushrooms, there's adaptogenic mushrooms, and those also I've noticed extreme benefits. Actually, if you take them hand in hand, there's even more benefits. So whole nother conversation for another day, but we all come from fungi.
Yeah.
Just gonna say
Have
it.
you seen Last of Us? I know what you mean.
Don't
worry. I'm kidding. No, and that's why there's mushroom functional coffee. There's you can go to the store and get
some of those
supplements.
Aren't good. Like mud water is not what people think it is.
There's different. Well, that's with anything. When something becomes a hit in marketing, you're gonna get 9 out of 10 times. There's gonna be about a bunch of shit brands.
FDA's okay, guys. This is what we're marketing this month.
FDA, they don't even monitor any protein powders. They don't do anything. They only do things that are considered nutritional on the back of bottles and bags, and I don't know. It's one of those topics that you can.
It just comes with, research and education, access to it as well. And
I also think when you first experience, environment is huge as well too.
huge.
Oh yeah, I think that's where a lot of fear comes from. Is someone when they try, they're just like, oh god, and then they start freaking themselves out, and then that panic ensues, and then it just becomes too much.
Yeah. And it's also why you're using
your
it.
mind.
For sure.
I always
For
say
sure.
it's your mind, right? It's your mind revealing itself to you, and you're going through this thing thinking like it's God or this and that. I'm like, it's your mind. You're discovering your mind. You're learning about yourself, and at the end of it, it's all clear. If that makes any sense.
There's a lot of people that would go, nah, they don't need it.
I
that's
don't think some people.
Yeah.
do.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You'd be like, no, you wouldn't be good on it. It'd be too
they're
much.
like, but I like it. Probably not, because because it's the mentality. If you have a negative,
sure.
if you're that type of person who always looks on that negative look on anything, I don't want to do that because of you have a higher chance. If you're scared to do it, then you're gonna have that's why they have shamas and like to kind of guide you into making sure you're in the right mindset, and that's what scares people.
I know
being out of control.
More than that, there's actually shamans that take advantage of people. I unfortunately had a friend
9
who
times out of 10, there's something bad.
went through a very, very bad experience, and they had to go through court and everything. And it was just,
Jeez.
it's really unfortunate, but it's not what you expect in some of these places. And I think that's the stuff that really turns people off. And again, it goes into research, access of information, and really taking the time, not just doing it because so and so did it. It took me 10 years before I decided to microdose.
Sure.
So I wish I had done it sooner, but I wanted to learn more about it.
Absolutely. All right, so we're going to wrap it on up. What are some of let's go ahead and break down, name 2 books that you felt in the last couple of years that you've seen progression through the knowledge that you've learned through those.
So one of them I'm reading right now, and you guys mentioned it, and it's only because it's been coming to me like crazy, which is The War of Art. And it's a book about resistance, which I desperately am learning. But I mean, it's a little older, and it might not be everybody's cup of tea, but it's very cutthroat, straightforward, and just I like how they break down the levels of it in that book. And because if you're not someone who understands it, like starting from the beginning to end, you're going to fully understand everything about resistance.
For sure.
So that's one book. Gosh, there's so many. This one's kind of more of a spiritual book, but it's called The 4 Agreements. The reason I like it is because of the agreements, and they've just helped me shift my mindset and how to go about things. So one of the agreements is my favorite one, is never take anything personal. And to not have expectations. For sure. And I was definitely someone, I think when you're younger, you don't realize that that's how you are. You're like, oh, you're my friend, you should do this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then you grow up and you learn. And then reading that book really taught me so much. And like, when you do those things, you're setting yourself up for success and the other person, for failure, and the other person for failure. Yeah. And I didn't want to do that anymore. And I had noticed things in my own personal life that were not going well, and I thought it was because of them, and then I realized I also played a role. And so taking accountability, I think that book teaches you a lot about that as well. There's just honestly so many great books. Every podcast talks about all the great books. Atomic Habits, it's another one I'm reading. There's a lot, but I think it's about finding the books that truly resonate with you, and you won't find those until you start surrounding yourself around the right people, because I didn't find those books until I did.
Nice. Have you ever read Show Your Work?
No. Is that his second book?
No, this one was from the dude who did Steal Like an Artist. Okay. Austin Kleon. I would highly recommend that book, especially if you're enjoying War of Art.
I am. It's a really, really interesting take on all of it. It's mind blowing. And then Think Like a Monk also. I don't know if you guys know that.
Heard
That's
that.
a good book by Jay Shetty.
Yeah. Okay. Where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, trying to get on Twitter because I know that is huge in our industry, all at Priscilla Natyve.
Fun. I got it.
Natyve, because everyone thinks it's spelled originally.
Perfect. Thank you for coming out.
And thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Until next time.
That was fun.